Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the roundtable portion of today's summit. I'm patching in from a very rainy day in New York, and I think there's lots and lots of people from all over the place joining us here. These are all speakers that have been sharing their wonderful expertise and experiences over the last few hours. And now we're going to come together and have a roundtable discussion around the future of luxury, luxury and fashion, what's been happening over the last 10 years, etc. So we have about a half hour. We have a lot to cover. So I'm going to start with a little bit of a rapid fire question, because I think that we just want to set the tone and see where the temperature is with everybody. So if we go across, I'm going to maybe just point to people as I see on my Zoom. In a few words, or maybe just in one word, if you really want to challenge yourself, how would you describe the trajectory of fashion in the past 10 years, which we know has been amazingly transformative? And then how would you describe its trajectory in the past 10 months, which has been accelerated in all those ways? So let's start with Marie-Pierre.
I would say over the last 10 years, maybe complexity, increasingly complex as an industry. Now, it's also something that I said, and even more fluid right now. And also now I would share what you said now in your talk, that there's blurred frontiers, no more categorized now segment. And I think that it's challenging for everyone.
This is true, yes, wonderful, thank you. Anna?
I'm thinking about, I think, transformation and then accelerated transformation.
Brilliant. Hi, Maria, your thoughts?
Hello. From the PR point of view, obviously, the past 10 years has been the rise of influencers and their power struggle with the classical fashion media. And in the past 10 months, actually, the trend has changed a bit, and both industries, I would say, they'll be going through a cleanup.
Oh, cleanup, that's a good one. Great. Varvara, your thoughts?
I completely agree with Marie, and just to add something what she has said about cleanup. What we see now, and this is especially visible among influencers, that influencers with purchased followers become even more visible than ever, and brands don't want to invest in a pretty picture anymore. They want personalities to work with, and also the role of small influencers and insiders has significantly risen, and nobody are looking only in followers, number of followers.
Great. Hold that thought. We're going to talk a bit more about that later.
Yeah. Okay.
Camille?
I think that in the past decade, when it comes to fashion, I think we definitely get more democratized. But I think that he also, when it comes to the individual and the customer, just overload with choices.
That's true. Yeah, and we should talk about that when we get to your brand as well. Hi, Stefan. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, Not Just a Label has been around for 10 years. So in some way, I like the Titanic analogy. I think, for the last 10 years, we knew we were going to hit an iceberg. We knew technology is going to disrupt fashion. We knew sustainability is an issue. We knew it would be the demise of big luxury brands. But the champagne was still flowing, as you know. It was sort of, people kept on going because the present was too profitable. And I think now we hit the iceberg this year, and people are scrambling. And some people say we knew for 10 years what was coming, and others are trying to, recover what was lost. But I think the world will never be just the same again.
Great, love it. And Luceny, your thoughts?
Yeah. I'm gonna steal a little bit from my colleagues. I like what Marie-Pierre was mentioning when it comes to challenge. I think challenge is a good word. I think that the digital revolution kind of challenge luxury brands or not. Brands in fashion to really evolve, to adapt in terms of the experiences, in terms of speed, and also in terms of the dialogue that you have with your consumer, more transparency, and so on and so forth. And I think that it kind of like links to also what Camille was mentioning with democratization. I think brand, no matter in which level of the spectrum you evolve, you have to be more democratic and more accessible. So that is showing your processes, showing your brand values. Everything is out there right now.
Gosh, we could just talk about all of that for the next 25 minutes. I think I love the breadth of the different responses. I think they all come from a place of just your personal experience and expertise. I also think there's such an interesting story of light and dark that's come out of it. You know, everything from this idea of accelerated transformation to democratization to, you know, which are great things, which are good things, all the way to Stefan's, you know, analogy of the iceberg that we've hit. And I think that's, there's never going to be just a one size fits all reaction to all of this, right? There's going to be the light and the dark. So to kind of go on through that, Stefan, I wanted to start with you. I just, as soon as I started to read about your brand, not just a label, I just loved it. I thought it was such an interesting point of view around nurturing, supporting a nurturing fashion industry, which some people might call a contradiction in terms. So, you know, when you think about the role of small global fashion labels that are playing in this new world, maybe the post-iceberg world, how, you know, how do you see that sort of changing previously? And really, I think more importantly, where do you see that going forward in terms of change, broad scale change?
Yeah, I think for many people, it's hard to grasp that there's a fashion industry beyond the, you know, the luxury brands and the big sort of fast fashion retailers. But I think the best analogy is the music industry. The music industry went through a transformation over the last 10 years where now, if you have a good idea, if you have the tools, you can create a song, a track, an album, and sell it and bring it to a global audience, you know, with a few clicks and without much marketing spend. And that is pretty much what will happen to fashion. So at the moment, we live in a fashion industry that is pretty much dominated by 8 large conglomerates. And then when you look at our platform, and there's about 49,000 emerging designers and independent brands on there, with about 300 new designers joining every month. So that poses the question, have we been too arrogant in terms of not seeing the huge potential that there is out there, or have we just sort of ignored that and not provided the right marketing and sales channels to these people? The interesting part is obviously the economic value. When you look at how society can benefit, then we definitely have to look at smaller brands, because smaller brands produce regionally, they source and are inspired locally. Now with the launch of our marketplace, we see how sustainability has an opportunity in terms of people placing orders directly with a small brand, those brands using local commodities and local goods to actually make these items and send them out directly. So we bypass an entire chain or sort of an entire industry that we no longer need. We don't need fashion weeks, we don't need runway shows, we don't need, you know, this whole hoo-ha that made it so hard for young brands to actually be seen. Now that there's absolutely no value put on editors anymore, on trade shows, fashion weeks, you know, we can do very well without that. And I think society benefits because we'll have much more interesting ideas coming to the forefront. We're supporting small businesses around the world. We're going away from the centralization around a few fashion capitals. So I think it's, you know, as you said, it's that iceberg that has hit finally. People can see what is happening now. And the world will be made of 2 types of people in the future. Either you accept the reality and you are willing to transform and come up with innovative business models that are more agile and more dynamic, or you long for, you know, the typical fashion dinner parties and fashion weeks that we had in the past that just consumed resources and never really paid, you know, emerging creatives.
Yeah, that's amazing and very prescient of you to sort of hit on that years and years ago. You know, I think personally, the last year has almost something I call like the rise of the small. You know, I think a lot of people are more interested in the local maker, the bakery down the street, you know, supporting someone that you feel like you know, rather than sort of a giant faceless corporation that you don't have a personal connection with. And us sheltering in place has sort of caused a lot of that, I think.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we're no longer talking about charity here. We're not talking about please support small business over big brands. The big brands have nothing to say at the moment because If you look at marketplace models like ours, and there's so many others, they rely on a no inventory retail system. There's no long supply chains involved anymore. We can ship, we can actually make goods for people that are bespoke, tailor-made, and made to order, which is probably the most luxurious way of selling fashion. And we're able to do that. If you look at Net-a-Porter or Farfetch, the only customization they're offering is putting initials on Louis Vuitton handbags. That's as far as they can go, because they sit on these supply chains that are not, they're a bit like an oil tanker. You can shift them by 2 or 3 degrees per year, but not much more. So suddenly you have this huge opportunity for a long tail business model where on our side, 49,000 brands can now suddenly sell direct to the consumer. The money that a consumer spends goes directly into their pockets. They don't produce the items until they receive the order. So there's zero risk involved, there's zero waste involved. And all they do is create new products, and they don't have to release that in seasons anymore. They just come up with a great idea for a dress, they sell it. Next month, they make another one. And we have so many designers, for example, one who lives in Lebanon, his studio was destroyed during the explosion earlier this summer. And he sold 5 or 6 of his couture dresses, and they're priced at $3,000 or $4,000. And that has been, you know, the one driver for his business.
That's amazing. Oh, and I'm Lebanese, so I really appreciate that support. It's very cool. Just want to make sure that anyone, I felt like maybe there were some people who wanted to jump in. So if anyone has any thoughts, please. Yeah, Marie-Pierre, I think I saw you.
No, I had a question for Stefan, because I completely agree with you. My feeling is also that the big groups, okay, they have the financial strength right now to weather this storm, whether we like it or not. And so what you're offering is also a lifeline during this very little time, because I think the question is also, in order to be able to change the world, you need to be able to survive first, and then we can make now those things. So you are at the best place to see, you know, how they are struggling. So I'm wondering if we get a sense now for the casualties, or how many of those brands that maybe don't tap into your resources or other platforms will be able to be in a position then to move forward with their business model. Because again, if you look at that now, those companies are cash rich, so they will survive.
I mean, the question is, will they survive? You know, because I think once government funding and all the furlough schemes and so on will be pulled out of the equation, you know, I think, I mean, we know there's some of the big groups that are about to fail. So the question is really, you know, what's the future like? But I think the further we democratize this whole cake and allow, you know, emerging or smaller brands to be part of that, the more interesting it gets. The only thing I think we have to admit is that obviously if you start sharing the cake, there's less left over for everyone. And with more and more players in the game, there's less for them. But the music industry did exactly that. So in some way, I think society has benefited because we have this vast opportunity now of not having to listen to the radio station and be fed music, you know, by 3 music labels. But now we go on Spotify and I can listen to pretty much any artist around the world. Do they become millionaires? I don't think so. But do they do what they love, and are they able to share their creativity globally? Yes. So I think this is where we need to, we need to judge what we as a society want.
Right. Yeah. And maybe we can have a layer cake so that there's more and more for people. I think some of the things that I've been thinking about in our work at McCann has been a lot more of, you know, less rigidity, a bit more like a softening, people being more open to things. Obviously, there's been a huge amount of conversation around inclusion and diversity. And I think one of the things that I was really impressed with was the proper label. So I was looking into Camille, your brand has this wonderful philosophy called the proper way. And it promotes empathy and empowerment, mutual advantage, simplicity, good profit, logic, creativity, and connection to family, to community. Wow, like all the things that everybody wants right now, right? It's like all of it. It's just, you know, mix that into a batter and make it into a cake. So I think there's just so much goodness and modernity to your ethos. So I kind of feel like it's this really powerful antidote to everything that's happening in 2020. So I'm just curious, you know, how did you come up with this proper way? And then how are you making sure that you're infusing it into everything that you do as a brand?
So first of all, so the proper way is the way of the proper label. It's slang, very small borderline between the proper way. We're still trying to intellectualize the word proper and not to be gimmicky. But how all of this came, I was inspired from this book, by this book of Charles J. Koch called Good Profit. And it's a very inspiring book because it's just this philosophy of improving your life while improving other people's lives. And this is a loop that is possible. And it just makes sense with us, you know, just I think spending the same amount of consciousness and questions on every part of the supply chain is a process that is never ending and constantly evolving. I think what Stefan was saying just before was the fact that you are really in charge as a brand, and a brand is more than what we thought it was, which means that you can have a part in the culture, in changing the world. It's the same as the idea of a celebrity, or is the same as the idea of a personality. You have this brain, this power, and all those decisions could be reflected in the process and the product. But the idea of proper wear, which is the wear of the proper label, is the fact that how can we be as inclusive as we can? And also, when we launched it with my sister, the goal was how can we build the world that we want to see?
It's beautiful. I love it. I think you should advise lots and lots of brands because this is very cool. I'm going to look up the Good Profit for sure. I think continuing on this trend of sort of nurturing and lifting up and elevating, you know, other generations or maybe companies that don't have, you know, the means or sort of looking back. I think Marie-Pierre, I think what's been so interesting about looking into the organization that you work with, Angels for Women, you know, I was very surprised to hear actually that it's the only business angels association in Italy focused on female entrepreneurship. You know, that's astounding, you know, considering that.
I don't know what's astounding, that it exists or that it's the only one, or.
It's the, yeah, I think it's the only one. I found that very surprising. And I think, I guess I was surprised because I feel like Italian women are such a force, like generally, in that, you know, they hadn't sort of been harnessed in this very formal way. But I guess, yeah, I would love to hear more about what you're doing. You know, what role do you see women-owned businesses playing in the future of Italian culture? I mean, Italian, everything is just so exquisite. And how are you seeing the role of empowering women in Italy sort of changing the culture in the country, you know, more macro?
I'll just a word on what we do, because there's a big ecosystem of now associations that have been now supporting women entrepreneurship, from accelerators to association like Gamma Donna, etc. So Angels for Women is really the first time that we are actually investing. So not just supporting, nurturing, but also investing. So we are here, of course, and as angel investor, it's not just investing for the sake of getting a return. No? At this level of investment in a company, you are here to support them. Italy, you see them strong women, but I would say that Italy is a little bit behind in terms of now. I was again looking at statistics just to see if they have changed over the last few years, but we have one of the lowest rate of women employment in the workforce. I think we are second worst to Malta, which I would say, if you think of Italy, is not something super now to be extremely proud of. So I think that women entrepreneurship, I mean, actually, I think you also have to think of two things. There are startups, innovative startups, and women entrepreneurship. And I think that sometimes we tend to forget that the role of women is much more wide in companies than it is in innovative startups. So Italy is not as bad as it sounds. So usually you have across the world, depending on the country, you have about 20% of companies that are led by women. 20%, 1 out of 5. It's super low, okay? Goodness. And when it comes to innovative startups, it's 13% in Italy. And you would say, okay, it's Italy. You look at the worst of the world, and there was a survey done by Crunchbase last year, 17%. So we're not that bad. So there's a lot to do. I guess all these statistics, to cut a long story short, is just to say that there's a lot to do. And I think that usually the performance of a women startup is slightly better than performance. Lots of studies, not because I'm inventing and I'm making this up, but the problem that women don't have access to the network. They don't know. And they have a different attitude towards risk taking. So once the company exists and it gets funded, etc., It has a great chance of now behaving really, really well. But at least in Italy, they just don't know. So I think one of the role of associations like mine and all the other ones that have been doing field work for so long is to be role models. I myself became an angel investor. I would have thought that to be an angel investor, you would have to, have sold a company, like to be Mark Zuckerberg. No, and you can make a difference. You can make a difference because you can really help those companies that now I gave a few examples during the speech, but in terms of changing the Italian culture, I think it will take time. But yeah, I think that women have resilience. He says that women create business out of opportunities and not necessarily necessities. So the soft skills of women. So I think that, yeah, it brings diversity to the entire startup ecosystem. Sorry, that was a long, passionate answer to the question, but there's a lot to discover.
Yeah,
a real lot to discover.
There's also the idea of changing culture through more women in leadership positions. So the more women are running businesses, the more culture changes because it's more of a top down and more of the mentorship as well, bottom up. So I guess it does take time, but it sounds like there's some wonderful work going on that will change that. So thank you. I wanted to turn more to a little bit talking about 2020 and the business of aspiration. So Anna, I know you write extensively about aspiration and brand models. You have a wonderful newsletter that comes out every week. And I think what you've been writing about is interesting because it really is, to me, when I read it, it's really harnessing all of the different cultural forces that are sort of hitting on society at once this year. And I think you almost think about like, what does peak 2020 look like, in terms of brand models? And my question to you is, if you were to choose a brand that you believe is operating at like peak 2020, in terms of hitting the nerve of modern aspiration today, which brand or brands would it be and why? And you're on mute. That's peak 2020 also, being on mute.
Because it's a great question. It's a difficult question because aspiration changed so much, and it went when I was writing a book, it was March and April, and I'm like, well, I need to go back. I need to write like a concluding chapter, because what was aspirational until then? If I was talking about taste and taste communities and the rise of niches and collectibles and curation and collaborations, now I need to add more of a social aspect to that, more of a communal, more not individual and more communal. So that is very aspirational. And the brand that I think captures this really well is Peloton. And this moment, not just because they were at the right place at the right time, that they had at-home exercise when no one could exercise anywhere else, but also because their biggest competitive advantage is their community. And I have to say they've done such a fantastic job, because you see for Halloween, you would see people dressed up as celebrity trainers on Peloton, like those who know, they're like, oh, she's dressed as like Julie, and and that is that they literally like reach the level of culture, which is aspirational. And the second thing that they're doing, they've been donating the bikes. They've been like sort of doing both communal and social, and now they're creating their own, in terms of growth and business models, they're creating their own apparel line, and there is nothing to prevent them to have their own food brand or nutrition or like wellness brand if they want. However, I do think that they know exactly what their brand is about, which is their community. And I would say from now on, they're setting the standard.
No, that's a great example. I mean, I could even see Peloton going into hospitality. People go to a Peloton retreat or a hotel, or
Equinox did it, so
that's right.
Them for sure. Yeah,
that's right. What happened to the Equinox Hotel? Who knows?
Do you know it's open, but the pool is closed, which is of course makes sense. It's November, but they're open. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay, good for them. That's
yeah, they shed. Yeah, I mean, speaking of bad ideas, like the shed and Equinox, I mean, no one's shopping in malls, and then you have a hotel. Anyway.
Yeah, I know. It's a disaster.
Positive note.
Right. Yeah, so I think this whole idea of brands and and brand management. Yeah, like who advised the Equinox, people there. And I think that's a really good segue to the ladies from White Rabbit PR, Varvara and Maria. I think you're working with a variety of brands to help them show up in the best way possible in the world. And I think obviously we're all getting most of our information from social media now, and the fact that a brand can sort of come from anywhere and go anywhere, which also Stefan's company has proven as well. So I guess from you guys, how do you see the role of PR as sort of this really, really heritage industry evolving in this new and modern environment that we're living in today?
Thank you, Nadia. Actually, the funny thing is that once the pandemic started, we were talking a lot with Varvara about what's going to change. But basically, in our approach to the PR, not much has changed, because we've been practicing what everyone is switching to this year, way before. So yes, obviously, PR today is much less about parties, events, and champagne, which we miss. It is true, because it's the energy and exchange with people, the physical ability to talk to them, which is great. But in a way, I was talking about the cleanup, and this year has shown more than ever, and what Stefan mentioned, that you can be really located anywhere else, anywhere in the world, but if you have consistent message, and if you are really proud of your product, if there is an idea and there is authenticity behind it, and with of course with proper PR and proper communication, you will get noticed. And that's the beauty of PR today, because and we see it even with the press and with influencers, that they have become much more open to brands. For example, like we had a case, it was actually last year before the pandemic, we started with a brand when there was nothing but the name of the brand and the product. The product was great. And we started, and they had like 200 followers on Instagram. And we started reaching out to the press, to influencers, and top influencers of the world replied, just because the product was good and the wording, the positioning was relevant to them. So yeah, basically it's today you really can get very big if there's content in you, if it's not just the shallow bling bling part, but if there's an idea and a good product, of course.
The democratization is, I think, another
Varvara
panelist was saying.
Yes.
Yeah. Varvara, is there anything?
It is true.
And just one more thing to add, if you as a brand would like to go wholesale and to be a part of sales showrooms, buyers want to see influencers, buyers want to see press, and PR helps with this. And here, PR helps you to be heard.
I love that. That's great. Well, we have about 2 minutes, and I want to make sure we get to everybody. So Luceny, you are last but certainly not least. The question I wanted to ask you about 2020 has been, as I think Marie-Pierre was saying, it's an incredibly challenging time for brands, not just from an economic standpoint, a financial standpoint, but, reputational and brand building. You've had a lot of experiences in sports and lifestyle, and now you're in luxury. So, what are the things you've observed during COVID that you think are actually here to stay? So things that are going to extend from here on. And I think we've talked a bit about some of these things, but from your personal experience, what are you looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I think we touched on this, and I think that actually those things that I'm observing are actually happen even before COVID. I think that back to some of the panel member touched on, I think you have to go beyond the messaging. It's all about purpose and community nowadays, and I think that this needs to be at the core of the brand communication. And what I mean by that is that COVID and the pandemic, forced brands to really look into who they were. And what were their values beyond the product that they were selling. A lot of stores were closed and people couldn't have access to, yes, they were still buying online, but they couldn't have access to clothes. And they were really looking to brands to show who they were as citizens as opposed to retailers, so to speak. So it was really a time for brands to look at themselves and see what was their added value in the society. And I think that back to what Stefan was mentioning at the beginning, I think that all of the brands realized, and even before, I have to say in the experience, for example, that I had at Adidas, that we had ultimately a mission to help the industry and help the community, and it can take a lot of different forms. You know, building internship programs with design schools. We currently have one with Parson or Central St. Martin in London to really help designers getting their project off the ground. When I was at Adidas, we had a whole collaboration section where we were really taking small designers and helping them to really scale and shed lights on their work. So I think that it's really about purpose and community, and really showing what your brand values are beyond what you're selling to people.
Yeah, that's great. There's an exercise we do sometimes with brands when we work with them, is we say, if you disappeared tomorrow for whatever reason, what would people miss? You know, and that's a really
Absolutely.
interesting
That's a great
thing.
question.
It's like, what is it that actually I give to the world beyond a product?
Yeah.
So wow, what an honor it has been to speak with all of you. I know we're up to time. One of my dreams is to be a talk show host, so I thank you all for letting me pretend for half an hour to be one. So thank you, everybody. This has been great, and everyone stay safe and stay sane, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Everyone.